progress in whiteflies. And Dr. Apurva Barnum, who's a postdoc here working in Dr. Mike Hayes' lab, is going to update us on silverleaf whitefly efforts that he's conducted in the last 2 years. So, Dr. Barnum.
All right, thank you, Dr. Roberts. Good morning. So today I'm going to talk about our whitefly monitoring project that we have done for the last 2 years. So just to give you a little background, you all know about whitefly, how it impacts our cotton, but just want to recap, when we have whitefly on our cotton, that's too late. I mean, we usually see a couple of whiteflies, then the population actually, grows tremendously if you have the right condition. So when you have whiteflies, you have adults and immature, then you'll see some shiny leaf. That's a sign, telltale sign that you have whiteflies on your cotton. Then those shiny leaves actually is because of the honeydew deposition from the adults and immatures. Those honeydew then leads to the development of sooty mold, like a mold, black mold. So the leaf would be covered with honeydew and the mold, then the leaf won't be able to have any photosynthetic activity. So leaf will actually decline, and then the leaves will fall prematurely. So once the leaf fall, you're going to see the plants with a lot of empty spots there, and that's how the plant health will decline, and we will have some yield loss. If you happen to have the open balls, then the honeydew will deposit on those leaves, and that will also be covered with sooty mold, and that may lead to some fiber quality deterioration. So that's kind of in general how the whitefly is going to impact our cotton. So let's talk about 2017, which was a historically bad whitefly year for all the crops, not only cotton, vegetables, everything. So we lost about $200 million for whitefly in 2017. So most of the counties were affected by whitefly. So why we have whitefly situation, every year, some year is bad, some are good, but why we have whitefly in this area? In order to look at that, we need to understand what we grow here. So we have some of the crop, big acres like cotton, cucurbits, cold crops. Those are all around. The year around, we have some crops which are favorable for whitefly. Those crops are good hosts for whitefly. And again, all the vegetables, whitefly like all these vegetables, tomato, snap bean. Besides that, we have some other weed hosts which are year around. So in general, it presents that we, in our environment, in our landscape, we have good hosts for whiteflies. So we can get rid of whiteflies. So we basically have to live with whiteflies, but the thing is we need to manage whiteflies so that they don't cause economic loss to our crop. So in order to manage whitefly, one thing we need to know when they appear in the in a year, or which time of the year they appear in the environment. Also, second thing you want to know where they are. If you want to get to your enemy, you need to know when they come out or where they are. That's how you're going to get to your enemy. So that's the kind of objective we had when we started this monitoring project, to look at how the population vary annually in this landscape. And second thing we want to look at, where are those hotspots of whitefly capture, where we can catch more whiteflies, so that we can pinpoint those areas and study in depth. So again, you have seen this map probably before at many occasions. So this is the study area where we had a network of traps. So on the east, this Fidelia. On the west, Dothan, Alabama, Cordell, Thomasville. So this is an extensive network of trap we put out in South Georgia. It covers 24 different Georgia counties. Each of these traps are located about 5 miles apart. There are 125 different sites where we had these traps. So it takes about 800 miles to drive all these different traps, and our people from our lab and myself, we travel pretty much every week this 800 miles for 2 years. So think about that. So what we have for these traps, we used yellow sticky cards So those sticky cards, they attract whiteflies and they stuck to the card. We put those cards at two different heights, just above ground, 6 inches above ground, and another one on this wooden pole, 4.5 feet, just to understand, okay, where we can catch more whiteflies. Those cards, we go back to the field every week, we retrieve them and we replace those cards, and we bring them to the lab, and I look at them, inspect the card for number of whiteflies present. And I counted the number of whiteflies on both sides of the card for 2 years, 2018 and 19. We counted about 22,000 cards. So one card takes about 3-4 minutes. So think about counting 22,000 cards. And we put quite a bit of mileage on our vehicles, 72,000 miles pretty much we drove for these 2 years, this project. So we covered a huge landscape. We did extensive studies for 2 years, so we have a good understanding about the population dynamics of whitefly in this area. So now, I'm going to show you some results here. Seasonal activity, so how the whitefly population changed over time. And the result I'm going to show you here is the difference between the capture or number between these two trap heights. So the lower one is the blue line, and the upper one is the green one. And invariably, you can see we always captured more whiteflies on the low trap. So that's going to be our goal. If we put low trap, that's where that's going to give us the best efficiency of trap. So that's what we're going to use for monitoring whitefly in coming years. Again, what we saw in 2018, that's again the population trend from January to December. We were pretty much quiet until mid-July, and that's when population started picking up. And August and September were 2 months when we saw high whitefly activities in the area in 2018. Again, we experienced Hurricane Michael October 10th in this area, so that actually damaged a lot of crops. Also, our whitefly population declined sharply. Again, the population declined after Hurricane Michael. Also, 2018, I want to remind you, we had several cold fronts. So we experienced several nights with below 32. So that also helped to have the population at low level. Now look at 2019. Again, we saw the same trend. The population was pretty low until July. Then it started picking up, and in 2019, population was much more higher than 2018. And probably you remember the month like without rain and the hot temperatures. So that's what is favoring whitefly growth in 2019. That's why we saw a much more bigger whitefly population than 2018. Again, I'll show you in a minute. We had fewer nights of frost, so that also helped to build up population early in the season. Again, when we have this kind of peak, if you have crops in the field, that's going to be impacted. So, for example, cotton planted late, would be more susceptible to have whitefly population versus if you planted early or on timely basis. And again, some of our fall vegetables were being impacted by whitefly in 2019. Now comparing these 2 years of data, the green line here is 2018, the blue one 2019. As you can see, until July, we don't see much activities, regardless of weather condition. But in 2019, whitefly was much more higher compared to 2018, about 4 times higher. And what was the driver of that? The weather condition. So hot and dry condition is very favorable for whitefly reproduction. Again, another thing to remember here, look at this 2019, even in the November, we are much higher than the peak months in 2018. So that's something we need to pay attention, because we are likely to carry a bigger whitefly population to 2018 unless we get some really cold front for longer period of time. This is a graph Dr. Roberts gave it to me. He looked at historical data where we have nights with less than 32 degree or like a frost days. So look at this. 2018, we had about 20 days of that kind of temperature, but in 2019 we only had 8, and so far 2020 we have 5. Hopefully we'll get more to manage this population. So again, weather is going to play a bigger role in whitefly reproduction and overall population size, what we are going to experience in our crop. Again, those red bars are those years where we experience more whiteflies. So 2017, of course, you can see we only had like 6 frost days. So again, the frost event is going to be important. Looking at the spatial density, this map is going to show you where are the locations we captured most whiteflies. So 2018 was not a heavy whitefly year, so pretty much distributed evenly. A lot of areas had some whiteflies, but 2019 gave us a better look at where the actually whitefly population building up or where we captured most whiteflies. So these are some of the traps located in Tift County, Colquitt County. Here's a little bit in Cook County. That's the hotspot. That's where we captured most whiteflies in 2019. And there is something to think about, and what are the crops, what are the vegetation in the landscape in that area, what made to build up this whitefly population to that level. So, in coming months, that's what we're going to tease apart. We have some of the vegetation information, and probably we can go back and understand what are the crops grown around that area that might give us some understanding why might this area be such a hotspot for whitefly reproduction. Again, another point here is whitefly. This is a kind of resident whitefly population. We have this whitefly in this area. It's not coming from Florida or Alabama or anywhere else. In some meetings, I get this question: did we get this whitefly from Florida? No. If we had, such issues, we would be seeing more red in this area. So our whitefly population are the resident population in these 3 or 4 counties. That's something we need to understand. Again, this is not going to be very important for our producers, but during this survey, I also found out there are other whitefly species. This is important because when you use yellow sticky cards, there will be some other whiteflies which very much look alike our silverleaf whitefly. If you happen to catch those, it will confound the number. So we need to be aware that there are some other whitefly species, and we want to stay away from those vegetation where these whitefly are associated with those plants. And I worked with some of our county agents to look at how this dewberry plants where you find these other whitefly species, and we confirmed that that dewberry plant is the one host of this particular species, and we want to stay away from dewberry plants when we put our traps. This is something I observed along the line. The weeds are also important in our overall whitefly management, because during summer you'll see some of these weeds. For example, this is a weed called small flower morning glory. You see them everywhere, during summer months, like whether it's in corn, it's sorghum, in cotton, everywhere. That happens to support a lot of whitefly population. We would like to manage that during the summer. Again, towards late fall, this is a cotton field. It's ready to harvest, but you'll see this weed. The name of the weed is called redweed. So this redweed, I found that redweed is a good host of whitefly. So we want to, take care of some of these weeds, because it's going to, support whitefly population, and that may act as an overwintering host. In the same way, I actually looked at a bunch of different weeds, and I collect leaves and bring back to lab and look on the microscope for the immatures. And I found that, of course, this small flower morning glory. Then there's another species called tall vervain, bristly starburr, redweed, wild poinsettia. So those are the weeds actually, support whitefly population in our system. So it's a good thing we're able to identify some of these. But again, most important thing is when they are present in the system. If it is in the summer, whether it's in the fall, so we have to kind of understand that. So I created this figure where I looked at different weeds and when they are present, in a given year. For example, right now, what you're going to see in the field is a purple henbit. Purple henbit can be a good host of whitefly, but I looked at a lot of purple henbit, but it doesn't have whitefly because purple henbit you start to see from kind of December. So it did not get the whitefly from the previous year. So purple henbit is one. Then wild radish is everywhere, but good thing is wild radish is not so good host. Then you have a small flower morning glory, which occurs mostly during the summer. It dies, when there is a cold situation. During winter, we don't see any small flower morning glory, which is a good thing. So once the host is killed, host is dead, whitefly is not there. Similarly, bristly starburr, good host, but again, it's a summer or early winter host. Redweed also, it's dead now. There is no redweed, you can see. There's another species called prickly cedar. It can sustain, until November, but again, it dies in December or January. But the one species, what I found is this tall vervain. I have looked at this species very closely, and actually, whatever I have seen until now, it can sustain the cold temperature. And every 10 or 15 days, I've been checking on that plant, and I still can find immatures. So that might be one of the overwintering hosts. So if we get to see, happen to see a lot of these tall vervain around our field, that might be a source, maybe going forward in the spring crop. All right, so that's the information on different kind of weeds and what are the important weeds in our whitefly management. Again, I want to point out something here where I saw a lot of fields. I wouldn't say a lot, but I mean several fields when I drove around for picking up these traps. There are some fields which are already harvested, but there are a lot of regrowths. And whitefly like the regrowth. Look at this picture, what kind of population we have on the regrowth. So I think it would be a good idea to get rid of this regrowth, avoid this situation, because once we provide whitefly an opportunity to build up during late in the season, it's going to increase the chance of going them for the next year. So we want to avoid some of this regrowth situation whenever we can. So what's the strategy for whitefly management? Again, we want to monitor the insect population. With these 2 years of data, we have a good understanding when they come out in the nature and when their population declines. Again, it's going to depend on the weather mostly. So we want to reduce the risk, avoid the late planting. Then we need to pay attention to weather. If there is a hot and dry weather condition in the radar, you better be careful if you have some whitefly in your field, because that's going to shoot up pretty fast. Again, it would be good to understand what's around your field. What are the crops? What your neighbor is growing, or what you have in terms of crop as well as the weeds. Then again, as I said, avoid those regrowth situations, timely crop destructions, field sanitations, get rid of some of these important weeds, what supports whitefly. And again, we'd like to use as much scout as possible so that we have the ability to spray or take care of the field when the population goes beyond threshold. Then again, timely application is very important. Dr. Roberts would say, over and again, how important to apply insecticide in timely manner, because once we miss the boat, the whitefly population can grow very fast and the situation can get out of hand pretty quick. With that, I really like to acknowledge a lot of people in my lab who helped me accomplish this project. A lot of driving involved. Again, the most importantly, the funding agency who helped us with the fund to do this piece of work. With that, I would like to thank you all for attention, and like to take any questions if you have.
Do you catch banded wings on your traps?
Yes, sir. Yes, we have some banded wings, but again, very spotty in some areas. And again, banded wing, they do not consistently stay on cotton. You see like a week or two, then they disappear.
We encountered a lot more banded wing nymphs across lower tipped, Coffwood, Worth, southern Darty, northern Mitchell.
Yeah, we catch them. I mean,
This year than the past.
Past, yeah.
Nymphs.
Nymphs, yeah. I mean, again, the banded wing is easy to even control compared to the silverleaf.
I
So,
realize that. I'm just making a comment.
yeah,
There seem to be much higher numbers than they had been.
it had been, yeah,
15,
no,
20 years.
exactly. Yeah, no, I have seen some. There's a field I saw in Worth County. It was covered with banded wing, and I actually texted that picture to Dr. Roberts, and like, that was the first time I saw that many banded wing in cotton.
The one with the CD all the way around it, variable length.
Yeah.
That one, I found quite a few of those this time. too.
Right.
You have no idea what that is.
I think that would be the banded wing.
If you had it as unidentified.
Oh, I mean, there are like several one. I
It
mean,
looks like what we used to call a greenhouse whitefly.
there is a greenhouse, and again, like some of these adults look very similar with the silverleaf whitefly, but when you look at the immature or the pupae, that's when you get to know it's a different species. Yeah.
With banded wing usually has a black.
Black on the back, yes.
The bristly starbur is such a preferred host for them that you can use it as a sentinel.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've seen that. And it's
Small flower morning glory also, but I've seen them kill bristly starbur.
yeah, bristly starbur one. There's another one, cockle bear. So that's another one.
Any other questions for Dr. Barber? One thing I do want to mention, several of us, Herba and Mike Toews as well, Stormy Sparks, are vegetable entomologists. And we as entomologists think the way we really get a handle on whiteflies is we all have to do our part. Whether you're a cotton grower, a vegetable grower, melon grower, collard grower, doesn't matter. But sanitation and managing that population so it doesn't go to the next crop. Herba very clearly demonstrated how we have cultivated crops 12 months of the year where these things are becoming an annual problem. It's interesting when Dr. Toews first came, we talked about this as a 1 in 3 year pest, but now, at least in tip and coffee cook, some berry, it's becoming an annual problem. So this publication, pick one up if you'd like. Any other questions?
Is that in treatment? Chemicals, anything to,
Oh yeah. Yeah, we didn't go into that today, but we have effective compounds. They're expensive. You got to be timely. Our best option is try to avoid and reduce risk and not have to treat. But there will be times. We have effective insecticides if they're used correctly. All right.
All right, thank you.
Both of them? Yes, thank you. All right. I'm Phillip Roberts, and we're going to take a few minutes, and I'm going to talk to you primarily about BT cottons and kind of where we are with their performance, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about aphid management. Before I do so, though, I've got a little survey sheet here. If you're a grower or consultant or you just work in industry, if you would like to take one or pass it back, if you don't want to take the time to fill it out, that's fine, but this is a survey asking a few questions. And basically this survey, we're just probing for information. We're looking at writing a fairly large grant on sustainable agricultural practices And these questions may seem a little different to you, but just answer them honestly. Hopefully we can use that information to try to do some good work for you. If you would, just put if you're a consultant or a grower on there. Or I'll assume you're a grower, but if you work for industry or you're a consultant, if you'd put that on there, I'd be appreciative. All right, just to begin with, I just wanted to kind of show the history of insecticide applications in Georgia. You've seen this chart before, but most years we're going to spray somewhere on average between 2 and 3 applications. You know, it's what a story to tell when we went from over 15 applications down to about 3 on average. And that's average. You know, it can range from 0 to 6. Why'd that happen? BT cottons, and of course elimination of the boll weevil, which really allowed us to do IPM, conserve beneficial insects. I would point out Alan Lohman. Alan, raise your hand. Alan is executive director of our Boll Weevil Eradication Foundation here in Georgia. So we appreciate what you and all your folks do to keep us boll weevil free, Alan. So y'all keep up the good work. If you've seen me talk, you've probably seen me show this slide. I know Dr. Toews loves to see this slide every time I talk. But in my mind, the best dollar you can spend in terms of insect management, insect control, whatever you want to call it, is hire yourself a scout, hire a consultant. The only way you can make good decisions about insect management is to know what's in the field and use thresholds, okay? I will give a little plug. We do 2 scout schools each year. Myself and Dr. Mark Abney, who's extension entomologist for peanuts, we spend half a day talking about insects and insect scouting in cotton, peanut, and soybean. So there's the dates for that. I'd love to have you if you'd like to be there. I just found this interesting. I had been pulling some numbers together, but this is kind of where we were in 2019 on average for the state of Georgia. But this just shows which insects we were making foliar sprays for. By far the most common insect we treat is stink bugs. And on average we sprayed about 1.6 times. You know, and again, those are averages. We spray about 38% of the acres for thrips, and we actually sprayed more plant bugs in the last couple years, but we've been between 10 and 20% of our acres being sprayed for plant bugs, and that's concerning to me because that's a critical time when we want to keep beneficial insects in there. But by far, the insects we treat with foliar insecticides are stink bugs, thrips, a little bit of aphids. Unfortunately, we sprayed some whiteflies, about 9% of the acres last year, and just a few acres for corn earworm each year. But I just thought you might be interested in how the state as a whole looks in terms of what insects we're treating. Another way to look at it is how much money are we spending on each of these insects on average. And again, since we're spraying, this is cost and loss. So if there's yield loss associated, I put that in this estimate. But stink bugs, again, are our #1 insect pest in terms of control cost and losses. Interestingly, I've got corn earworm coming in at #2, not because we treat corn earworms, but we have quite a bit of expense towards our BT traits in our varieties, right? So that's where that number comes from. Our #3 insect would be thrips. Again, we need to use something at planting on every field of cotton you plant. And we may have to supplement that with a foliar spray. #4 insect would be silverleaf whitefly. But I thought that was interesting. And just wanted to share that with you. But on average, about $68 an acre is what insects cost and losses are for us each year. Okay. I want to talk to you about BT cottons. And when's the last time you heard anyone in cotton talk about tobacco budworm? We don't even talk about tobacco budworm. Why is that? The BT is near 100%, and it has been since day one, okay? We still talk about corn earworm, though, because we know corn earworm still can exploit BT technologies, okay? So I want to spend some time talking about corn earworms and where we are today. We've had BT cottons now for 20 some odd years, but just a little bit on the biology of corn earworm. Today, they're in the soil in an overwintering stage as a pupa in the soil. They'll begin to emerge sometime in the next several weeks, March and April. You can find them in clovers and a lot of other wild hosts. When we get into June, a very high percentage of corn earworms in the southern U.S. funnel through corn. Okay? And that's an important thing to remember about this pest. A lot of corn earworms funnel through corn before ultimately they get to cotton, usually around the 10th to 15th of July each year. Okay? And then they'll complete a couple generations, one in July and another one in August, and then perhaps a third one on cotton, on some late cotton, but then they go back into overwintering. But the important point here is corn earworms that get to cotton funnel through corn. I want you to understand that. All right, and why is that important? If we think about BT cottons, you have BT corns as well, correct? And you've got all these different names, but in reality, what we have are 4 BT genes. Very similar BT genes. They're either in corn or cotton. There's just 4. The very first gene put in cotton in 1996 was Cry1AC. But here we have Cry1AB, but these are all very similar. Those are very similar, whether in corn or cotton. We've got Cry1F. That's the second gene in wide strike. But it's also in corn. We've got the Cry2ABs in corn as well as in cotton. We've got the newest, the third gene we're seeing in cotton is a VIP gene. But again, they're in corn, they're in cotton. And that's important for you to understand. It's basically the same genes. They're a little different, but they're basically the same. Now, if you look at cotton and BT cottons, the history of BT cottons, 1996 was the year I started at the University of Georgia. That was the first year we planted BT cottons. The old Beauregard, single gene BT cotton. Over time, industry has stacked a second gene and in more recent years, a third gene. Why did industry do that? Number one, to improve efficacy. You have to think back a long time when we just had single gene BT cotton. But I remember when Scott Brown was a county agent in Colquitt County, we did soybean looper trials on BT cotton. You remember those? On single gene BT cotton, but not on these 2 genes. So they improved efficacy against other pests. They improved efficacy on corn earworm. We used to spray a lot of corn earworms on single gene BT cotton, and I'm going to show you because I've been digging up old historical data. The other reason they did it was for resistance management. Okay? And I'm going to share with you some numbers, but we have resistance. Corn earworm is resistant to this first gene. We have a lot of concerns about the second gene. Okay? We shouldn't be surprised that we have resistance to this first gene. It's been there 20 years. We should just be thankful industry was proactive and put these second gene and third gene in the cotton. Y'all with me? But the other thing I think is so important, and this is my opinion, but we're selecting for resistance not in cotton. We're selecting for resistance in corn. That's where resistance is happening, is in corn. Because a very high percentage of the population goes through BT corn and it comes to cotton. If you're a corn grower, I would encourage you to plant a refuge. Okay? All right, Dr. Greg Payne sitting over here on the side, but this is some of his data. He's at the University of West Georgia, but the Georgia Cotton Commission has supported Greg's work for several years now. And this is a very telling slide. But what these bars are representing is something we call a LC50. And that's just a common measure of a dose of insecticide to kill half the insects of a population. Does that, y'all with me? And we can compare those from year to year. This is showing LC50s of a product called MVP2. But Greg, this is basically the first gene in BT cotton that's been in there for 23 years. or 24 years. If you look over here on the bottom left corner, there's a little blue blip right there. That's the dose it took to kill half the corn earworms in 1996. If we look over here on the far right, I don't think you killed half of them, did you, Greg? Something's changed, right? That first gene, there's not much left there. All right, I'm telling you this, but how many corn earworms did y'all spray last year in the state of Georgia? Not many on cotton, right? But this first gene, we got problems. That's easy to see, right? So, if the first gene's not working, let's think of 2-gene BT cottons like a Bollgard 2, a Twin Link, or a White Strike. What are they now? They're a 1-gene cotton. You with me? Makes sense, right? So I just pulled some data out, and it doesn't show up real well, but there's a little box from 2003 to 2009. That's what I call the 555 era. We were very heavily planted to 555, which was a single gene BT cotton. What this line represents is the percent of acres, of BT cotton acres, that we sprayed for corn earworm in the state of Georgia. On average, over that 8-year window or 7-year window, we sprayed 45% of the acres. Y'all remember those days? Okay. Once we really started planting 2-gene BT cottons, we just don't spray many acres for corn earworm. That's a good thing, right? But I'm telling you, that first gene's not working. But hey, we sprayed less than 5% of the acres for corn earworms this past year. So what about the second gene? I'm not going to talk about the second gene in wide strike because that second gene in wide strike is not real active on corn earworm. It has some activity, but its strength was on fall armyworms, okay? So I'm going to show you some information on the second gene. And again, this is some of Greg Payne's data. But if we look at 2018, again, he calculated these LC50s. And what we can do when we have LC50s, if we have a comparison to some laboratory susceptible strain, we can look at an LC50, the ratio of that wild population to the susceptible strain. And if it's greater than tenfold, if the LC50 is greater than tenfold than that susceptible strain, a lot of folks would use that as a definition of a resistant population. When 2018, Greg, if I looked at this correctly, if 4 of the 6 populations you tested had a resistance ratio greater than tenfold. They actually range from 49-fold up to 85-fold. That's a concern, right? Something's changing. Again, this is just laboratory data, but something's changed. In 2019, based on the dose he was looking at, he couldn't calculate LC50s. But we know the susceptible lab strain, it only takes 0.2 micrograms to kill 50% of the corn earworms. But these populations he tested, when he did greater than 10, that's 42-fold higher, he never killed half of them. Something's changed. I want you to understand that. You just need to be aware. So I tell you all this. I just got problems with the first gene, problems with the second gene. But again, how many corn earworms have we sprayed in the state of Georgia? Very few. Now, why is that? In my opinion, it's just because we haven't had the numbers to see the problem in the field. If you're a corn farmer, if you'll go out into a 2-gene BT corn, and if you'll open ears of corn, you know what you're going to find in those ears of corn? Y'all know what you're going to find? You're going to find corn earworms. Why? You have so much pressure you can see it. Because there's multiple eggs laid on every ear of corn. But we have this rating chart, and this is based on field performance. There are differences in how these technologies perform, but you just need to be aware of potential problems. And we hadn't had problems in Georgia. But I just want to show you a little bit of data from North Carolina, just so you know there are problems in other parts of the country, particularly the Mid-South. But this is a trial we worked on a regional project. We had a location here in Tifton, but we had basically, Mike, I think we found 2 damaged fruit the entire year from corn earworm. But basically what this is showing is percent boll damage in North Carolina on August 19th, 5th week of bloom. That's the percent damaged bolls in wide strike cotton where it was untreated, wide strike treated with Bidrin. There's Bollgard 2, untreated, Bollgard 2 treated with Bidrin. I would have expected more damage where Bidrin had been sprayed, but it didn't happen. But what I want to point out, let's just look at this Bollgard 2. In the untreated plots, he was almost 50% damaged bolls. Y'all hear what I'm saying? They got a problem. Where they sprayed a pyrethroid a couple times, they took that damage down to about 10 or 15, and then where they had put Prevathon out, the little green bars, I mean, that's the best product we've got for control of corn earworm. All right? I just want you to understand that, hey, we've got these concerns. We hadn't had the problem in Georgia, but there are problems in other parts of the country. We've been concerned about this now for several years. In fact, for the last 3 years, we've done trials at Midville, Plains, and Tifton. I thought I saw Travis sit down. There you are. You planted this, hadn't you? Look, this was in Tifton. You can come plant this one next year. But basically, we look at all the different BT traits, the non-BT, 2-gene, and 3-gene BT cottons, and we set these up to have an untreated, a pyrethroid spray, and a diamide or a Prevathon spray. And just because we want to monitor what's happening in the state of Georgia. Now, this is a summary of our percent boll damage for the last 3 years. Non-BT cotton, on average, 0.6%. We don't have a problem in Georgia. We got these concerns that we got resistant populations out there. Y'all with me? I mean, data's data. Now, there are pockets where we treat corn earworm. There are hot spots, I guarantee you. But when we look at our data, 0.6% boll damage. And the way we do this, we go out there right before we pick the cotton and we just count these cadaver bolls, I call them, that are still stuck on the plant. All right? So here's the other technologies, but you can see there's a little more damage in the 2-gene products, a little more damage in wide strike compared to Twin Link and Bollgard 2. All the 3 genes are real low. Another way you can look at that is percent control. So wide strike, about 80% control. Twin Link and Bollgard 2, 92 to 94% control. All the 3 genes, basically 99% control. You know, for such low pressure, it still kind of gives us an indication of how these technologies work. But you just need to be prepared, make sure you have a scout, be familiar with how to scout for corn earworms, be prepared to react, be good managers. So I'm going to end with this slide. And I just think you need to be aware there are issues out there with BT cottons. We've been fortunate in Georgia. I want you to understand that susceptibility to the first and it looks like the second gene has changed, and that's not going to go the other way. We haven't seen field problems on any widespread scale in the state of Georgia. In my mind, it's because we don't have the populations there to see escapes. I mean, if there's nothing there, it doesn't matter if they're resistant or susceptible. One of the things I think about as I'm driving up and down the road is, why are these other areas of the country having a problem and we're not? I mean, isn't that something I should think about and Dr. Toews should think about and Dr. Payne? Well, I've got some thoughts. In my mind, there are 2 reasons. Number one, it's something I call a corn-cotton ratio. I told you most of the corn earworms funnel through corn. Well, if you have 3x the acres of corn to 1x the acres of cotton,
That's a little different than if you have 5x acres of cotton to 1x acres of corn. It's just it's a numbers game. So that's one reason. So if you look at the Mid-South and you look at that upper North Carolina, they tend to have more corn than we do compared to cotton acres. But the other thing that I think is important, and if we go back to my first couple slides, I said I was concerned about spraying more and more plant bugs in Georgia and hearing more chatter about plant bugs. But both of these areas of the country that are having the most consistent problems with corn earworms have to deal with tarnished plant bug. Not just spraying a field here or there, but spraying a lot of fields multiple times. And in my mind, the beneficial insect doesn't have a chance in those environments, and they still matter. I mean, we've drifted away from thinking about beneficials like we should. But maybe it's coincidence that these areas that are having corn earworm problems also have tarnished plant bug problems. I don't think so. I think we as growers, you as growers and decision makers, scouts, if you have a plant bug problem, let's address it. But if not, let's let Mother Nature do what she needs to do. All right. Any questions? We got just a few minutes left. Or comments. I was going to talk about aphids, but I'm not going to do it. I can tell you this. If you went to the plant pathology section, there's a new virus called cotton leaf roll dwarf virus. I'm interested in that virus as an entomologist because it is vectored or transmitted by aphids. Based on our efforts, we cannot eliminate aphids. We cannot eliminate the risk of the virus. Actually, when I sprayed cotton once a week, I had zero impact on the percentage of plants that had the virus. So don't go out there and try to eliminate your risk to getting this virus by trying to eliminate aphids. You can't do it. The only thing we really learned about trying to eliminate aphids was we got to spray mites pretty consistently where we tried to eliminate aphids because we killed all the beneficial insects with those aphid sprays. All right, that's it. One of the things, if you don't have any questions, I've got some pesticide forms up here. If you want pesticide credits, while you're in here, I need to put them somewhere else, but 2 hours commercial, 1 hour private. Any questions? Yeah. We're going to have them. So if I'm a grower in this area, I'm thinking about whiteflies right now. A couple things you think about. Number one, you plant smooth cotton. Do not plant a hairy cotton. Number two, I'm not going to tell you to plant early, but I would try to tell you not to plant any late cotton. You plan on having them right now, unless something changed. We'll continue to monitor this. What happens between now and April 1, we'll have a much, much better handle on where we're going to be. But I'm going on Purvis trap data, the weather we've had, but also consultations with vegetable consultants and scouts and agents. So we've got whiteflies in cold crops right now. So I'd plan on having them. We can manage them, but you just got to, you need to start thinking about it right now. Any other questions? Y'all have a great day.